Good evening and welcome to this week's episode of Sunday Night Live, the automotive show where we talk about all things automotive. If it's variable ops, if it's fixed ops, I don't really care. We're all in the automotive business and there's something we can learn from everybody. And the more we learn about all of the other parts in our business, the better we all are. Because let's face it, if somebody has a bad experience at dealership A and they go to dealership B, they're going to think we're all the same. So if everybody does the best for all their clients, then we all win. So this week, before I get into my special guest, I have Chuck Hartle and Kaylee Felio of PartsEdge here. We're going to talk about parts. Nobody ever talks about parts. It's like some kind of joke. It's, oh, parts is parts. You're going to learn tonight that parts is not just parts. There's a whole lot more to this parts business than a lot of people know. And Chuck's been doing this for 23 years and 1 month and counting. So I think he might know a couple of things about parts. But before we get into that, the double knee replacement update, just to let you know, let's just make sure we're actually streaming, because I had some issue. Okay, hold on a second. I think, yes, it's streaming now because Michael Weldon says, we've been using Chuck services for years. Best move we've ever made. An endorsement right out of the gate. You can't get any better than that. So quick update on the knees. I am coming into week 11 on Tuesday since my double knee replacement surgery. I set up a recumbent bike in the office the other day and it's working good. I'm getting more bend out of it. The only problem is it wipes me out the next day, like completely. As a matter of fact, we went to breakfast this morning. Did the bike yesterday for a half hour. Got a lot of bend, which was good. But after breakfast, I was bushed, crawled back into bed for about 3 hours. I think that's when you emailed me, like, hey, when are you sending me the link? I said, I'll send it this afternoon because I knew I was about to go under. But all in all, the bending is improving. I walked a mile on the boardwalk the other day, so that was very good. That's the longest I've walked, without a cane. Out there since my surgery. So things are looking good. I've got my appointment coming up with the surgeon this week. So we'll find out a little more. I've got to get a little bit more bend in the knees because otherwise he said he's going to put me under and bend them for me. And I didn't like the sound of that. So that's why I got the recumbent bike and I'm doing everything I can. So special guest, Chuck Hartle and Kaylee Felio. For those few that may not know who you are, please don't go past 5th grade because then it gets long. Tell us about you, how you got into the business, what makes you so passionate about parts. Take it away.
Kaylee.
Oh, me. Okay, I'll go first because mine's shorter than Chuck. So Chuck and his business partner, Cliff, actually found me in a Subway restaurant. I was managing. I was about 19, and they offered me a position. And so I learned about the operations of PartsEdge, went off and did some other things, learned about sales, and came back and started doing the sales and marketing for PartsEdge. And I'm passionate about the industry because I love what we do. I think it's very unique, and it's fun to tell parts managers what we do because they don't tend to believe it. It's kind of too good to be true. So that's what I'm learning to do and figuring out how to sell to parts managers. So I'll let Chuck tell his story. It's a little bit longer.
Well, I got into this business back in 1976. I applied with 50 other people for a part job. At the time, I was working at a flower shop at a large mausoleum and funeral home in San Diego, delivering flowers, making arrangements. And I applied to be a part delivery driver, and I got the job. That was the good news. The bad news was it was a dime under minimum wage, but I was so desperate to get out of the flower business, I took the job. And in about a year, and I found out of true love. And business now, 43 years, and been going for right around 3 years. And that's what I love. She thinks I'm because it's all numbers. Dollar value you. You know, she thinks, you know, a non non CPA, but you know, controllers and stuff like that. It's all about parts. So, I just love it. You know, I white fish can. I moved here about 5 years ago, down in San Diego. But I tell everybody, I mean this. I love where I live, and I love what I do. That's my wife said, when do you think? And I said, on the other side, I love what I do. There you go. Very passionate about.
Now, I'm hearing a little bit of interference on your mic check. Your mic, Chuck. Is anybody that's in the audience getting some interference on Chuck's mic, or is it just me? Please let me know. We've got Terry Torline. Looking forward to the show. Welcome, Terry. Nice to see you again. Michael Weldon said, ouch, probably going to my knee comments from earlier. Michael Larkin, hello from West Hartford. Tully Williams, hello all. Love parts, can't sell hours without them. And Pat Porras, hello all. So is everyone able to hear Chuck? Yes, interference. All right, Chuck, what I want you to do is if you could go out of this, go out of the studio and then come back in. Don't forget, when you come back in, you have to allow your mic and video, and then hopefully that will clear up the noise. Oops. All right, so let's give him a second here.
Yeah. I'm going to text him too, just to.
Steve, service and sales. Welcome, Steve. Dan Studham. Hello, Paul. Yes, she understood like typing. Yes, yes. All right, so he'll be on any second now. Every once in a while, we had a techno glitch where his computer would not connect. Let's try it again. Okay, how about now?
There you go.
Perfect.
I keep hearing like it. Oh well. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, now I can hear you fine. Sounds like somebody's typing, but nobody's typing.
Yeah, I hear that too.
Kylie, what if you mute your microphone? Let's see if that makes a difference. Okay, Chuck, can you, but not both of them. Chuck, can you unmute your microphone? Okay, let's try it again. Check 1, check 2.
Hello.
Yeah, that seems to be working fine. So we'll do one mic at a time. There might be some conflict there.
Okay.
So yeah, so basically Chuck's got a lot of experience and we got an endorsement right out of the gate. And parts is an interesting part of the business because it's the part I think that is least understood. Okay. Most people don't understand parts. Parts is a whole nother animal. Chuck and I and Kaylee were on a call the other day because we had not met prior to this, Chuck and I at least. And you know, it's funny. I used to run some Midas stores back in the day, and when you run an aftermarket repair shop, you are the parts department, the service department, and the sales department all rolled into one. All of that stuff falls on your head. And it was funny because I've been in it so long, and Chuck's been in it so long, that one of the weird things that happens to parts guys and gals is that you remember part numbers. So we were rattling off part numbers from 100 years ago like it was yesterday, and that's another sign that you're getting old, when you remember stuff from yesterday 100 years ago like it was yesterday. And all of a sudden I thought, oh my God, Kaylee's probably thinking, here are these old geezer geeks, they're throwing out all these part numbers, like what did I get myself into? But it's true. Parts is a really interesting animal, and a lot of times, you know, some of the struggles that the parts managers deal with are a lot of times somebody's brand new, right? They have no training. Training seems to be like the common denominator in just about everything in the automotive business. And I suppose other businesses as well. But a lot of times when you go into a store, whether it's an aftermarket repair shop or a dealership, one of the biggest problems you have with the parts manager is that there's no training there. Maybe the parts manager that was there left for whatever reason or had a blowout with the owner and now they're gone. and people get heated in the moment. They don't think, oh, well, what about the replacement? So then maybe there's somebody at the parts counter, hey, kid, you're up. You're the parts manager now. And it's not quite that easy. So Chuck, why don't you talk to us a little bit about what you've seen over the many years you've been in this, about the training for parts managers and how that impacts, the success of a good parts department.
Sure. When I first got into it, it seemed like there was a class all the time, either through the DMS vendor or through the manufacturer. This was back in, the mid to late 80s, early 90s. As time has gone, the classes have kind of receded. One of the things that I did do from about 2003 up till 2009 is, I guess you could say I was Chuck Honda. I worked with Honda. I developed their MAPS curriculum, which was their training arm for parts. I didn't go out and do the training, but I put together, I was what they call the SME, the subject matter expert, and I had these guys come and they all put it into this really nice, neat 3-day package for training for parts managers. And then American Honda, in about 2007, 2006, they launched what they called DSO, daily stock orders. And so for almost 2 years, I flew around the country 3 weeks out of every month, and trying to run PartsEdge at the same time, by the way. And let me tell you, there was a lot of pulse in the air going, no. Anyway, in the morning, I trained all the, what would be CDK, at that time ADP, parts managers, how to set their system up for daily stock orders instead of weekly. And then Honda kicked them all out. And in the afternoon, we got Reynolds and other. And at that particular time, there was very few others. There was probably 2 other vendors other than that. Now we have about 8 or 9. But what we've seen is after the downturn in 2008, 2009, Paul, is literally training has gone to webinars, online focus and stuff like that. And the problem that you run into with that, and we ran into this with American Honda, if people couldn't make a meeting, a face-to-face meeting at a hotel when I was flying all over, they said, we've got a webinar for you. And there was a gentleman by the name of Gary Naples. He did the webinar training, but what ended up happening is those people got very little out of it. And it was the face-to-face and that getting them out of the dealership, getting them focused was a big way of doing that. And it just seems like that's gone the way of the dodo the last 5 or 6 years, Paul.
The thing with online, it's good to a point, but there is some stuff you really need hands-on, because when you're in the store, it's very easy to get distracted, right? And particularly in the parts department, there's a lot of stuff that goes on at the same time. Somebody's always walking in, and when you're learning online, they don't know if you had to be pulled away, right? Yep. And you miss critical stuff, and you come back. It's not just like just dropping back into the groove and then picking up where you left off. So yeah, no, there's a tremendous value in face-to-face learning, because you can always gauge. You can also gauge your students' engagement. Are they paying attention? Are they getting the material? Because it's not hard to pick a deer in the headlights look. When you roll out certain things, when you say certain things, if somebody either understands it or they don't.
That's right. And
if it's your job.
Paul, you couldn't have said that any better, because when I was doing training, I went through a couple of times where, how do I get their attention? Especially if I started to see the deer in the headlight look with the audience I was teaching. I always knew, okay, I need to pull it back up, to 30,000 feet. I'm going to. But, sometimes, and especially with parts managers, they're on their feet all day. They're typically working a lot. And so I got to where I used 2 things. I had one of those stress balls, the little soft, spongy balls, and I'd walk around the room, and if someone was fading out, I'd throw it right at them. And that worked pretty good. But the first thing that worked that I learned, don't do this anymore, I only used it in 2 classes, was I had a squirt gun. Somebody and squirt him. And one guy came over after me. He was so upset that I squirted him, and he was falling asleep. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And Paul, to really sum up, like when the DMS vendor, and I know a lot of the people listening here, they've gone through a DMS upgrade, or they've gone on their first CDK system or first Automate, and they fly in a few people from the vendor and they sit down with you, and that's where the on-site at the dealership doesn't work. Because what happens is these people are trained to sit and hound the daylights out of the parts manager, go, do you get it? Do you get it? Do you get it? And they're trying to work. And they finally said, yeah, I'll sign up. Just get out of my office. And they never really get the true training they need, which I believe happens more away from the dealership face to face.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We got a couple of comments here. Michael Larkin says, it is the person doing the live CC. CC. Ron Overs, good evening, Paul, Kaylee, and Chuck. Hope you have a great show this evening. Parts are so important in today's dealer world. Thanks for sharing your expertise. Yeah, no, parts is cool, Hunter Swift gives us the thumbs up, and Ty Thompson from Cars on the Move. Good evening, friends. I love parts, like I said, because most people don't understand it. And the training piece, it is so critical. I mean, I'm sure you've seen a lot over the years when you walk in. Todd, welcome. Training is key to any success. I'm sure you've seen a lot of different personalities and a lot of different people in the parts business, and I guess you probably size them up fairly quickly as to who knows what. One of the things that I always found interesting is when I walked into a parts department and I just asked a few basic questions just to kind of gauge where I was at with that particular person, because I called on stores out in the field, all different DMSs. And some of the questions, the first question I always loved going over to the special order shelf, because the special order shelf, to me, that's like the barometer of what's going on in a store. And you have more experience with it, so maybe it's not as accurate. But for me, I loved walking up to the parts guy and say, hey, let's go over to your special order shelf. And I would point to all the stuff that's loaded with dust that's sitting there. And I would ask, the first question is, you know how much money is tied up on the shelf there? And rarely was anybody able to give me an answer. Most of the time it was like, well, I could look it up. I said, no, that's okay. It was just an exercise, because I knew they wouldn't have the answer. And then the next thing I would ask is, okay, so all these parts that are here, do you know if all of these are scheduled? Because you special ordered them for somebody. Do you know if they're scheduled for the customer to have it installed on their car? And again, I would get that look. And so, well, I could look that up. No, that's okay. It was just an exercise, right? I mean, parts department stock, what is it uncommon for a parts department to have $300,000 worth of inventory in their parts department?
To be honest with you, Paul, that's just about normal. We see extremes, of course. We see smaller stores with about 50, 60,000 in inventory. And we got a couple of, we got one we work with that has $19 million in inventory.
Wow.
Yeah. And they got 21 different makes underneath one rooftop as well. So you see these kind of extremes, and the value in that inventory, I was the co-founder of the Mopar Master Parts Managers Guild way back in 1991. They still get together. I don't get with them, but we had this one guy who was in the group who was really good at marketing. And to your point, Paul, one of the things he did, he had this marketing piece, and he had a bunch of dollar bills hanging out of a bin. And, he equated it to, he said, look at this. You're a bank manager. You're managing dollar bills. You can turn these things into parts, but you need a good return on your investment, and you need to make a profit doing it. And it was one of the best visuals I'd ever seen by a parts manager, because I'm not a marketing guy. I'm more of the techie geek, know. And, that's one of the things you run into a lot with the personalities that I see. I can typically sum up about 90% of the parts managers out there. He or she they're just like me. We are anti-social control freaks, and we're really, really good, and leave us alone. So that, when I used to see good marketing parts managers, I go, oh, I'm so jealous, So there you go.
But so my point is that the training is really critical. Like the parts manager doing so many things at the same time, it's very easy to get lost in the sauce. And if the store's got a lot of money tied up in parts, that's when you end up with stuff that, what's that word, that dirty word that starts with an O?
Obsolescence. Yeah.
Right. So now you have all this money tied up in inventory. You can't do anything with it. You can't return it. And you're hoping. There's all these great people that come in with all these wonderful programs that they'll move your obsolete parts for you for 25 to 50 cents on the dollar. I mean, how good does that make you feel? If you have, all this money tied up, what I refer to as frozen capital.
Yep. And what's even happening more, Paul, and this is one of the things that we had on there was, and maybe this is just a shift into where over the last 5 or 6 years, parts management is completely different for everyone out there that might not be a Honda or Toyota dealer. And it's called ASRs, a new acronym we all got to get used to, automatic stock replenishment programs by our manufacturers. And when you look at, and I'm going to pick on GM, but the others have these same type of qualities or programs going down the road, talking about, Paul, hey, maybe I get an opportunity to sell some of this obsolete inventory at 30, 40, 50 cents on the dollar to get rid of this idle capital to free up some money, right?
Yeah.
Well, manufacturer, like with GM, their RIM program, and those who are listening know exactly what I'm going to say here, the PACE program, Parts and Service Excellence. And there's 3 different components to this, Paul. Number 1, compliance. You have to buy 8.5 parts out of every 10 parts they suggest. You got to be 85% compliant. Number 2, purchase loyalty. You have to make sure that 90% of everything you purchase is coming from General Motors. Anything else counts against it. And number 3 is sales loyalty based on the GM VIN. It's like 92% of everything has to be a GM part number. You miss any one of these 3s, you lose your whole customer focus incentive for 60 days.
How much money are we talking?
Well, I can tell you one average dealership, without giving names, he called me up and he was ready to turn me upside down because he said, you just cost me $20,000. He was earning about $10,000 a month in a very mid-sized GM store. He had GM Chrysler.
Yeah.
And I said, what happened? He says, I fell out of compliance. And I go, wait. I went in and I looked, on Global Connect. I go, well, you're at 88%. And I went and looked at the purchase loyalty and I went, well, you're at 94%. What's going on? And that's when I was educated by the service manager about sales loyalty. They were using aftermarket chemicals on these repair orders. And that's what was counting against them. Even though General Motors doesn't have that line for flushes and so forth, charging those aftermarket numbers against it took them out of compliance. So the middle one is a killer anymore, where it's like the manufacturer has found a way to zip and make sure dealers aren't trading obsolescence between each other through these parts brokers. And the way they're doing it is by purchase loyalty. Because if I buy $10,000 from you, Paul, of your obsolescence, and I receipt it into my store, that goes right against my purchase loyalty. So, the manufacturers are getting very smart about closing all these little loopholes that even help us to get rid of some of it.
That seems a little bit one-sided.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how does a store even keep up with something like that? I mean, this business.
Yeah.
There's a lot that don't. How do they even have a fighting chance without somebody like you coming in and being able to do the forensics to diagnose all that?
Well, let's put the forensics into very short and sweet terms here. Anymore, you cannot buy yourself out of an obsolescence problem. Used to be 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, you could buy yourself out of an obsolescence problem by earning return allowance to try and retire some of that debt. And you usually ended up with an excess inventory problem. But one of the things, and I can sum it up in 2 words, why this whole thing has been changing, and a lot of people just aren't aware of it, especially dealers and general managers as much. I'm getting more and more phone calls now, Paul, with dealers saying, my parts manager, he or she has gone to heck in a handbasket. The obsolescence is growing. I don't know what's going on. And what it boils down to, 2 words, warranty, retail. You know, the manufacturers, when they are giving now, you know, everybody's out getting dealer uplift, warranty, retail, and they go from that old cost plus 40 to cost plus 80. They're all, yeah, we finally are getting some money on warranty.
And it sounds good. It really sounds like brilliant marketing.
Oh, absolutely. I was talking to I did a seminar 2 years ago for the Connecticut auto dealers, and I had about 85 people in the room, most of them general managers, controllers, and dealers. And I brought up warranty retail. And I said, how many of you got warranty retail? You got the uplift? And they're all raising their hands going, yay. And I go, okay. Number 1, what's the first thing you did once you got that uplift? And they go, well, we implemented it and started counting the money. Okay. What was the second thing you did? Second thing, I said, did you adjust the commission programs for your counter people? Because all of a sudden you just gave them an instant 40% raise if you went from 40 to 80. They go, and a couple of them said, yeah. And I said, what's the third thing you did? And boy, Paul, that's where I got the deer in the headlight look. And I go, did you think that maybe you should have taken about 10% of that gain and started accruing it for obsolescence? Because guess what? They lost all of their return allowance. The manufacturer, it's just a shell game now, Paul, and that's the forensics behind it. I love the word you use, perfect, is that the manufacturer is still getting their piece of pie. They may have given you 80%, but they're cutting back warranty labor time guides. They're cutting back incentives. They literally have eliminated return allowance or made it next to nothing. And that's exactly why we start to see, we've seen about a 7% growth in the 160 dealerships we work with day in and day out, about a 7% growth overall in obsolete inventory. And I can sum it up in those 2 words, warranty retail, Paul.
Wow. You know, and what's funny is that there are different ways to look at things, okay? And depending on one's understanding of the situation, that determines how much success they're going to have with it. So on the one hand, it sounds good, but unless you know all the other components, which you know because that's what you do, you can now plan for, I mean, they giveth and they taketh away, right? It's like when you have insurance claims. Yeah. You're happy that the insurance company just floated $5,000 for that little hiccup you had in the parking lot, and it cost you your $500 deductible. But now all of a sudden your rates have gone up for the next lifetime. Because I don't hear any insurance company coming back and saying, oh, you know what, you've been a good boy, and so we're going to cut your rates. I saw commercials like that a few years back, but I haven't seen those commercials in quite some time. So I'm guessing that program went away.
Yeah.
So somebody that just all of a sudden they've got this influx of money they think is great. They're seeing the pennies, but the dollars are starting to float away, and they're not catching that because they either don't have the time or the experience to be able to account for that. Because when you said you asked those specific questions and you got the deer in the headlights look, I mean, that's brilliant.
Yeah. You know, it's a shell game, and the manufacturers, you know, we can call them the Darth Vaders of the world or whatever. They're going to do what they got to do to make money. Let's face it. They're franchisee, you know, the franchisor, all the dealers are the franchisees, and they live and play by the rules. And you just have to figure out the best way to get around that shell game. I always try to tell everybody that with the warranty retail and the way obsolescence has been growing within parts operations and whatnot, no avenues to really get rid of it, except to purge it, is that that you come up with a good strategy, sound strategy that, let's face it, all of a sudden the price of driving an X manufacturer vehicle, because these things have changed, it just became more expensive to drive this vehicle. It's time to tweak some of your maintenance items a little higher, tweak your matrix a little bit. That's one of the things, Paul, that we see a lot of, is everybody thinks, let's tweak our matrix and that's going to solve our problem. And I have to tell you, matrix and pricing in parts departments, almost globally, is really at a point where very little of the product is matrixed anymore. I did a webinar about 3 years ago, and I took 116 dealers and I put all their customer pay retail in a big vat. I just said, okay, bitty. Let's see how much of this customer pay retail is really being escalated. And it was only about 25% on average out of 119 stores. And so a lot of times dealers go out, they tweak and adjust their escalators on only 25% of one profit center customer pay. It makes very little difference. What I find out is a lot of times you're giving away a lot of the brake pads, spark plugs, and things like that. And you don't have to go out and matrix them. You just have to tweak them a buck or two here or there. And it all starts to add back and get some more gross in there. So you can start accruing some of it to get rid of that big O word that you're talking about.
Yeah, that's crazy. Let me go to a couple of comments so we don't fall too far behind.
Sure.
You got Mike Larkin and Ty Thompson bantering back and forth. Pat says paradigm shift equals training to educate as a skill development. When we educate, we measure the outcome by asking the participants to show me what they've learned, which goes back to your in-person training. And Ron Usher says, hurt my hand a few years ago, could not work on the line for a month. They put me in the parts department to stay on board. As a tech, I always thought they had it made in parts. Boy, was I wrong. Much respect to the parts department. It is not an easy job. The center of the hub. Thanks, Chuck and Kaylee. And Michael Larkin says, jump in there, Kaylee. What's the future of parts?
Oh, I took it off the mic. I was muted. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, okay. The future of parts.
Yes.
PartsEdge is the future of parts. It's that simple.
Like a true marketing genius.
I mean, it's you guys are doing it the hard way. Just get some help with PartsEdge, really.
The first thing is to accept the fact that maybe there's somebody else that knows more about the running of the parts department, because that's what they specialize in, than me, the parts guy.
So I don't know if it's that we know more. I think that most parts managers know what they need to do. They just simply don't have enough time because they're not just running the inventory, they're running employees, customers, all the manufacturer programs. There's just so much going on that's what PartsEdge gives them, is that ability to be more efficient with inventory. So I don't think we know.
You work alongside them to kind of guide them as to what some of the best practices are.
Yes. Definitely.
Mark Williamson says, as far as warranty retail goes, 40% is a lot to make off something that requires no selling effort. If a dealer could do that in the stock market, he wouldn't be a dealer anymore. Well, I don't know that they're making 40% on parts. Are they making between 30 and 40, or a lot making 40?
Well, the math is cost plus 67 is a 40% profit. And a lot of people start to get lost with when doing warranty, and the old warranty that used to be cost plus 40, that's 20%, 25.8% gross profit. Okay. And so working from that and starting to move forward, when you think of, okay, cost plus 40, and we've gone to cost plus 80, and those types of margins, and like you said, even at cost plus 40, that's a good return on your investment without a tremendous amount of work. But the hindsight is behind it, and one thing I can guarantee you, looking at inventories, is 20% of the inventory is doing about 80 to 85% of the sales and the gross profit. A lot of times we break down our inventories into 4 categories: productive, excess, what we call forestock, and obsolescence. The first one is good. The other 3, all idle capital. Okay. And typically that's what we see. When we tell someone that they got 35% of their inventories productive, they think that really stinks. But in reality, that's actually about 10% above what a lot of people typically see. So because there is a lot of excess inventory, wasted inventory. One of the manufacturers, and I love this term, I love saying this all the time. GM managers came out with this over 10 years ago when RIM first kicked off, Paul. Okay. They came out with the term one-hit wonders. One-hit wonders. And what that means is, here comes GM, you post a lost sale or make a sale on one fender, your first demand you've ever had on the part. And the next day it shows up and they want you to approve it and put it in stock. And you go, wait, I just sold one. And taking 8.5 out of every 10 parts, and with Ford, by the way, it's 9 out of every 10, their new RIM program's 90%. They have to take some of these one-hit wonders to remain compliant. And so it's really interesting what I see personally. And of course, if there's manufacturers listening, I'm dead. But the reality is they love pushing the inventory at the dealership, all in the name of guarantee, and they leave the dealer holding the bag. They're doing all, better on the dealer's shelf than on our warehouse shelves, and they let them bear the cost of managing the inventory, and all the holding costs involved with that. And oh, by the way, if it really doesn't sell in 12 or 16 months, depending on what manufacturer, we'll take it back. But by that time, the dealer has absorbed all the holding costs.
Right.
Isn't that interesting?
There seems to be a common denominator here. It's almost like on the variable side of things. Right now, we've got severe shortage on inventory. But I can tell you many, many, many years where they just jammed so many cars on people. Oh, don't worry about it. Just take these 5 truckloads. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. We'll help you and we'll cover you in some other areas. And next thing you know, you've got some leftover model years, and the incentives have evaporated from the leftover stuff. They give you a payout, which is not usually the greatest of percentages. They give you a payout, and they move on to the new model year. And now you're scrambling, trying to get rid of the boat anchors that are on your lot. So yeah, I'm seeing a pattern here. Now, a couple of other things that we run into is, when dealers switch DMS systems, okay? Now, I may be a little bit skewed towards the big guys. That's just me. But not all DMS systems are created equally, in my opinion. Now, I'm not saying that the pricing is justified in some of these systems, because there are a lot of things that go into pricing a DMS system. But let's say I'm with one of the big ones, and I switch to one of the really small ones, and I'm sold this, oh, you're not using most of the stuff, so you don't need all that. You're paying for more stuff than you're using. So now you go to a system where you have maybe this many data fields that populate, to a smaller system that is way less sophisticated, that is more steps. Now, if you have 10 steps in, you got to take 10 steps back, right? It's not as easy. Now you go to this many data fields. So now when you transfer your data from the big company to the little company, invariably, there's going to be some data loss. right? There's going to be some data loss. And,
Yeah.
and oftentimes that ends up being a customer file or parts sales history. These are all critical components that determine what you need to reorder, right? If you don't have the history, then how can you accurately forecast what you need to order seasonally in order to have parts in stock so that you can fulfill your OEM requirements, so that you're not buying out stuff or you're keeping cars needlessly overnight because you have to go get that part from somebody else? You know, what are some of the issues that you see with switching DMSs, with the setups and data loss and things like that?
Obviously, going from one of the big two and going to one of the smaller ones, and I'm going to actually say big three now, because dealer track, we actually work with more dealer track clients than we do rentals now. That could be through, their super security, their sophistication, whatnot. But when you get to some of these smaller DMS systems, obviously the features are gone. The reporting mechanisms are really lacking. And that's where we come back up and try and fill those holes, Paul, with some of these stores like this. One of the things that just amazes me, and it gets back to that training aspect of it. And maybe someone from Dealer Track is listening on this, and they'll figure this out. But I'm telling you, over the seminars I did until COVID hit, I would bring up Dealer Track has this reporting functionality called Web Focus. It's a portal on a website, and it does really good work. Okay. And I would get in these seminars with all these parts managers who are on Dealer Track, and I'd say, how many of you use Web Focus and you've heard of it? I have yet to have one that did. And then a couple of them discovered it and went, how come I never knew this? And here Dealer Track has this wonderful reporting mechanism to help them out, because their canned reports are terrible. And they never really educated the dealer that they got this great reporting mechanism. And so, CDK, all of them are guilty. But one of the things we've done working, and we've probably gone through 30 different migrations from rentals to Dealer Track, or CDK to Dealer Track, or vice versa. We've gone through that over the last 15 years or so. And one of the things we focus in on is those data fields for parts that are critical. Months no receipt, months no sale, last 12 months sales. Educate those dealers to make sure that they educate the DMS vendor, because we found out if you don't ask, you don't get.
You couldn't have said it any better. And like you said, it's everybody, right? Because I've talked to dealers. I sold DMS for CDK for several years, and I know what the capabilities are. Okay, it's a very robust system. Probably not that different than rentals. It's potato. They're similar in different ways, and they're all very good. And Dealer Track has certainly come a long way over the last 15 years. In the early time, a lot of the complaints that I was hearing from people was the stuff just doesn't tie together too well. They've got a lot of pieces out there. They own seemingly everything, but it doesn't seem like everything talks to each other. I'm sure a lot of that's been worked out. And to your point, these systems are very capable, but that is not communicated to the store, because I've heard people ask for things, and I'm scratching my head. I'm thinking, wait a minute, didn't your rep tell you about this, and this that's available that'll do all of those things you just complained about that you can't figure out? And they look at me like, what are you talking about? What am I talking about? Everything that you're looking for, your system does, whether it's rentals, whether it's CDK, and apparently whether it's Dealer Track, a lot of it now. Yep. But it's not communicated.
Even Dealer Built and Automate have come a long way. It's much more granular, and it looks old school, but they've been doing some upgrades between those. And I really can't sit and complain about any DMS anymore that I'd sit there and go, this is terrible. Do they have a lot less functionality? Yeah, some do. You get what you pay for.
Yeah.
That's the thing about CDK. They're the Cadillac. The problem is that thing will almost make bread.
Yeah.
Are they ever going to teach you how to make it and utilize tools? And that's kind of the niche we fill, Paul, is, my job is to sit there and go, what's this program do? Will it make it work a little better? Well, let's find out, because most managers, their biggest fear about setting up new sources so they can control their inventory, new pricing, is they implement it fails and they go backwards and then they don't go forward again because they don't really have the time to test it and make it work right.
Right. They're too busy putting out fires.
You bet.
All day long, every day. Let me jump to a couple of comments here. Now, Michael Larkin, to your point about Kaylee, there's some issues with her microphone. That's kind of why she's cutting back some, because when she comes on, it garbles the other stuff. So she's with us in spirit for sure. but there's something up with the microphone, and this is actually going from the computer to the phone, and that's still acting up. So every once in a while, as my good friend David Kokenauer said, it's technology. It works 70% of the time. The other 30% of the time, you just kind of need to deal with it. But Mark's, let's see here. Pat said, man, you love this from the show that other time. D3, data drives decisions. I love that because you can't make the right decision without the data.
That's right.
Michael Offmuth says, Paul, who do you feel is the best option for DMS? I think I've hinted, but I can't publicly state. You and I will have that conversation offline. Dan Stedham said, what is the average percentage of special order parts, no stock, you see in your dealership inventories?
Okay.
Can you put a number on that?
I can. A good number is about 3% of your part number population should be special orders waiting for customers. Now, as far as non-stock parts sitting on the system waiting to be tested, that usually ends up being about 80-85% of the total part number population, because you're adding, the average dealership adds about 15 to 20 new part numbers all the time, okay, every day. And when you add that up, once you get a demand and you don't have any other demand, the part's just sitting there on the system. And for those of you that might be dealer track, you've probably already found the rude reality, and this is just one of the little weaknesses that dealer track has. They never, ever, ever get rid of a part number off your system. Whereas all the other DMS vendors, you can sit and tell it a certain period of time. If I have no more demand for X amount of months, drop off the system. Dealer track, it doesn't. It just keeps building, and you get these massive databases that are incredible. And I've talked to them about it. Maybe someday they'll solve it, but they were really proud about the fact that no part number ever drops off their system. And I'm going, man, that really
not a good thing.
Data drives decisions. What a great comment that was, because you know what? Data drives decisions, but it's the old garbage in, garbage out. And on some of these dealer track systems, 85-90% of the part numbers on there are junk. They're 3-4 years old and they never go anywhere. You got to sift through those to try and make a decision on the parts that are out there. It's kind of crazy, but
that makes no sense. There's no workaround?
No workaround. We tried it and we failed miserably. We went and superseded everything to one part number, Paul. Dealer. We took all their old obsolescence and superseded about 40,000 part numbers to one part number. When they went back and looked up their history 2-3 years old to look at a repair order, it all went to everything charged out was the one part number.
Wow.
And the dealer let us try it. And we found out it failed miserably, so we backed off completely. So there you go.
Well, you don't know unless you try,
Yeah.
But it doesn't sound like you're a big fan of the matrix. But I think if properly executed, there is some use for it, no?
Oh, I'm a big fan of it. It's just what I tend to see now, Paul, and some parts consultants back in the old days, probably in the 90s and the early 2000s, they all had these escalated matrix,
Yeah.
$1 cost plus 300%, and then $1 to 250 cost plus 250. And one of the things that I really try to educate parts managers on is to get them to go look at their override reports. All of the vendors have the override report where when does a parts advisor do S equals and changes it? And you know where they did a lot of it? In those really, some counterperson standing in front of a customer with a plastic clip. And they go, oh, this is $5 and you want 10 of them. Oh, that's $50. Okay. And that's how their escalator, it's this unrealistic escalator. And so, of course, the parts manager authorizes them to override it. And then all of a sudden you get a report this thick every couple of weeks that shows we did 500 overrides. When you go to the grocery store, do they ever stop and go, let me change this price? Across the barcode scanner. So the whole point being is if you're the management of the dealership and you're setting the pricing, make it realistic.
Right.
For people accountable for when they don't sell it, but selling a 50-cent clip for $5, that's unrealistic. So go make it realistic. That's
right.
what
Okay. Now so I guess I learned this from Kaylee, and I thought this was really, really cool. And I know that the big DMSs have unlimited escalation points, which again, to your point, it needs to be properly set up. To just randomly say, make 50 cents, $5, that's crazy. But if properly set up, there's money to be made there, because a lot of these smaller systems, they allow for up to 10 different escalation points. The difference between unlimited and 10, if properly set up, that could be a gold mine there, because if you have a matrix that's set up, let's say with 76 different escalation points, and it's properly set up, you could literally make an extra 10% without selling one additional part.
Yep.
With the matrix that's properly set up. And what I learned that, man, this is the old parts geek coming out in me, and I got really excited about it, is that you guys have a way to convert, if you will, maybe I'm using the wrong word, but to be able to make some of these smaller DMSs that have the limited escalation points, to give them more escalation points. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah. First off, the first thing you got to do is analyze.
Yeah.
Go get the sales. And that's why I can sit and say with confidence, Paul, only 25% of the parts ever get escalated. They either get overridden or whatever. And we use 40% margin. What sold above 40, what sold below 40. And when we sit and analyze that and look at it, now we can really focus in and look at the different categories they have. Let's say they got 5 escalator categories, a penny to $10 and 10 to 25. And we can analyze that.
My knee, sorry. Oh.
But you can analyze that and see which escalator category are you doing most of your sales in based on the piece count, and what's the actual cost there. And that's where you can break it down a little bit more, maybe break one of them into 2, add a little bit more to one at the lower side. And like you said, it just puts dollars back into the gross.
I mean, that got me so excited. I mean, it's a little thing, but sometimes it's the little things that get you really excited, because that's something that these other systems really didn't have the opportunity to do.
Well, Paul, when I do some seminars, and I was doing some 2-day seminars there for a while, and one of the questions I would ask, the dealers and the parts managers in the room, when was the last time you changed your escalation? When was the last time you really reviewed it and changed it? And see, that look that you just gave is exactly right. I'd say, how many
4 managers ago?
Oh yeah. Oh, they're ancient, and it's because a lot of them don't mess with our pricing. Everything's working good, and we don't. Yeah. And the reality is, tweaking it. I see a lot of escalators this day and age, Paul. They sale-proof parts. It makes it impossible for service advisors to sell the captive items because they're trying to make their grosses back up there, and they're giving away a lot of the maintenance items. And what they need to do is come out with a realistic escalator that works right and tweak their maintenance items up just ever so slightly. That's what increases the gross this day and age in a parts operation.
And that's where it really pays to bring in somebody like you guys to come in, analyze it, look at the stuff they don't have time to look at, and kind of give them a roadmap. So look, here's where you're missing opportunities, right? This is your money.
Yep.
This is how much of it you're not capturing.
Yep.
Because as we said, it's not uncommon for a store that could have $300,000 in frozen capital, and for that small percentage to be moving stuff, you know, there's so much money to be made. And I've always been a firm believer that of all of the things at a dealership that affect your profitability, your operations, or how you run that store, how you run the different departments, operational efficiency, that impacts your profitability more than anything else that's out there.
Absolutely. You know,
incredible.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of times when you're having issues with your parts operation and we first go in and start working with them, it's really important to understand too that, you know, if an inventory is messed up and all of a sudden you change direction and start getting really efficient, you know, you start controlling your special orders more effectively, which, by the way, special orders are the root of all evil in a parts operation. And you brought that up, Paul. But you start to focus now more on making sure customers get back in. What's ordered is going out. A majority of the parts are getting fulfilled.
Yep.
Start that today. And a lot of times this microwave mentality that we're all in is, you change it today, you still have 12 months of sins to pay for sitting on that shelf. And so in a parts operation, a lot of times can take 6 months, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, that, you know, if some of you, if you come out and you all of a sudden make some grandiose change, just remember your gross may be playing with the pricing is one thing. Your inventory, as you correct it, it may take 6 months to really see some results, Paul.
That's in, you know, that's in everything. I don't care what it is. I say to people, the only thing that turns on instantly when you flip a switch is the light bulb.
That's right.
That's it. That's the only thing. Everything else, you've got to give it 6 months plus. I don't care what it is, what the product is, what the service is. I don't care what it is. You've got to give it at least 6 months to get going, because you don't know where that impact is going to come from. But you can't go half-ass into stuff and change every couple of months. Well, I tried this for a month, that didn't work. Tried that for a month. No, you weren't committed. You didn't stay the course. Gary Vaynerchuk, who is a brilliant guy, they pay this guy hundreds of thousands of dollars to walk onto a stage in a t-shirt, ripped jeans, and use swear words to translate very complex things into very simple life situations that make sense. And he says, and this stuck with me, everything always takes longer than you plan. Everything.
Amen.
Just stay the course. Now, Dan Stedham says prepay, pre-book on special order parts is the only way to go. I agree 1,000,000%. But how many stores actually stick to that? Well, it's Mrs. Jones. She's a good customer. She's been coming here for years. Yeah, what happened to Mrs. Jones? I don't know. We haven't seen Mrs. Jones in 2 years. But, well, her headlight's still on the shelf here from 2 years ago.
Yeah.
You know,
well, and the other thing with that, Paul, and I'll shoot some holes in that, warranty. You can't get them to prepay warranty. And if it's a non-critical repair, picking the door panel, I don't want to be inconvenienced anymore. You know, and you know, the poor dealership stuck with a $500 non-returnable door trim panel because won't come back in to pick it up. Anyway,
there's no urgency on their part. They don't care.
That's right.
They don't care. Wow. You know, the hour has just buzzed by, and this seems like to be a common thing here every week. An hour is a long time, but it really goes pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So I very much appreciate the time that you guys have spent here. Sorry about the microphone thing, Kaylee. But what I'd like you to do is, put any contact info in the thread, not in the platform here, but after the show, if you go back on LinkedIn, go into the actual show, put any contact info, because we covered a lot of ground here, and a lot of it may be new to some of the folks that tuned in, and there are a lot of people that tune in afterwards that watch it on the replay. And I want them to be able to reach out to you for anything that maybe they need clarification on, or maybe to find out a little bit more of. As was said when we first opened up the show, Michael Weldon said they've been using your services for years and it was the best move they ever made, quote unquote. I'm sure there may be a couple of other people in the audience that might benefit from having an offline conversation with you guys. So thank you very, very much for being on the show. I hope this helped a lot of people that maybe didn't know as much about parts, know a little bit more about parts than they did before we started this an hour ago. Man, there's so much to it, so much more than even I know. I learn new stuff every day from experts like these guys here. So it's been extremely educational. I thank you. Unless there's any other questions from the audience, I don't see any. Thank you for tuning in and supporting the show. Michael Larkin said, Kaylee, he reached out to you on LinkedIn to connect. He's a good guy. He's a marketing guy, and you do marketing, so you probably have a whole lot to talk about. Wish everybody a safe and successful week coming up, and we'll see you next week on Sunday Night Live. Thanks again.
Thanks, Paul.